Welcome back to another volume of truly disturbing tales from Reddit. Today we're going to be narrating 3 new unsettling stories taken directly from the platform. I encourage you all to sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy these terrifying personal accounts. Now, without any further delay, let's jump right in. This story happened about 4 years ago, around the time that COVID was just starting, so it was a while back, but I still feel that this is a worthy post. It was early 2020, and I had just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was long, so they moved out and the house was left uninhabited. Luckily for me, it was actually pretty close to my workplace, and my sister pretty much rented it to me for free. I just paid the water and electricity and looked after the house. I was living there for a solid 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night after coming back from work and parking my car in the driveway, I walked towards my door and noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking that it might have been mine since I am an avid smoker. But after looking at the brand name, I realized that it wasn't mine and threw it away. I didn't think much of it beyond that, just shrugged it off as some asshole throwing it on my curb. I went on with my night, and nothing unusual happened. 2 nights later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts. This time, bunched up near my porch. Needless to say, I was pissed off and thought that someone sat on my porch while smoking, but since I didn't know who it was, there was nothing that I could do about it. I noticed they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off just before I started approaching. That night, I was watching a movie on my laptop and it was pretty late. Had to be past 1 a.m. So I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighborhood, and it was COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night, although I didn't think much of it when I heard it either. About a half an hour later, I was even more surprised when I heard a few people chattering nearby. I thought I heard 2 distinctly different voices. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about, as their voice seemed almost muffled and quiet. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly crept off my sofa, walked to the front door to make sure that it was locked. As I was approaching the door, I froze mid-step as I heard 2 sets of footsteps approaching my porch and reducing the volume of their voices to no louder than a whisper. I realized right away that whoever this was wanting to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the door or the doorknob to be shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they'd walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you could move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback instantly. Leaning right up against my window was a man. He was as startled as I was because he basically stuttered over his own steps as he jumped back. He tightened his hoodie to cover his face, so all I could really see was his big blue eyes looking right back at me. His friend realized what was going on and immediately started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 5 or 6 times, but the door wouldn't budge. All the while, I was stuck staring at them, frozen in fear and trying to comprehend the situation. I eventually snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room, where I pushed a table up to the door and called the cops. As I listened and expected the 2 to come inside my house any minute, I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. Once they realized they couldn't get in, one of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. But by the time the cops came, those two were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but they were more active in the neighborhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't keen on staying there, so shortly after this incident, I moved out. My sister ended up selling the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar has happened ever since. I honestly don't know what they wanted, or why they were so determined to get in, but whoever it was, let's not meet. Nobody takes me seriously when I tell this story, so I finally decided to post it. The backstory is long, but I swear it's important. A few years ago, I was 17, just graduated from high school, and got my first job at a Christian camp near Yosemite in California over the summer. Mainly, the people I worked with were great, really sweet Christian college kids, the good kinds. There was this one guy though, I'll call him Carl, who I frankly just did not like. Carl was tall, handsome, and charming. He had curly golden brown hair and a smile that could stop your heart. His eyes, though, were dead. He never got those little crinkles in the corners of his eyes when he smiled. It was like the top half of his face was just that, dead. There were things I didn't like about Carl right off the bat. His eyes, for one, that dead smile of his. He also never asked for anything. He'd just try to twist your arm. He'd very softly, very slowly try to manipulate the situation until you almost felt like you owed him. Each time, it felt like a part of my brain shut down, like it slammed a door shut, and there was a very clear feeling of, no, this isn't right. Not sure if this analogy will land, but he's the type of guy that you save him some food, but do not walk out into the woods to give it to him. Something was that type of wrong. I got along with most of the little cliques at camp. No one really disliked each other, as far as I knew. We just kind of broke off into groups based off what we liked to do in our free time, or who we worked with the most. Carl, though, seemed to make friends one-on-one within a clique. By the time he left the group, it had been decimated. They were fighting, not speaking, and didn't trust each other. I know this isn't a lot of evidence, but I'm trying to paint a picture of a man who just seemed wrong. One day, everyone in camp decided to go to Fresno. We were tired of camp food and wanted a real dinner, maybe see a movie or go bowling. I was off work last that evening. Now, at camp, we had a sign-out sheet. Being so close to Yosemite, we often went hiking. So if we left, we had to put our names down, along with where we were going, when we left, and when we should be expected back. This way, if something were to happen, they would know when to start looking for us. So, I put all my info on the sheet and headed down towards the parking lot. My friends had all divided up into their cars. I didn't drive at the time, and I jokingly asked if they had forgotten about me. They said Carl had said I could ride with him. I looked around, but I didn't see Carl, although I had seen his name on the sign-out sheet. All the hair on my body stood on end. I was terrified to get in the car with this guy alone. He felt off, wrong, and just like somebody that I didn't want to be alone with. I don't know how else to say it. My friends were telling me I had nothing to be worried about. Things would be fine. I eventually saw Carl walking towards the parking lot, that same dead smile planted on his face, and everything in me screamed not to get in the car with him. I said that I was tired and wanted to stay in tonight. That's when Carl laid the charm on thick, telling me what a good night it would be, that I owed him because of God knows what, flashing that dead smirk. But I refused. That's when he got angry, told me that I didn't need to be such a bitch about it. I thought we were friends, the whole lot. But I didn't back down. I still refused. Finally, everyone figured out that I wouldn't be persuaded. I hugged one of my girlfriends goodbye, whispering in her ear not to ride back with Carl under any circumstances. Once they all left, I walked back to the area with the sign-out sheet to cross my name off. since obviously I wasn't going anywhere. I saw the sheet, saw where my name was, and my heart dropped. My name had already been erased from the sheet. My name is Ben, and I live in Australia. In the southeast of Australia lies the state of Victoria, and in that state lies the high country, an extremely vast and remote expanse of alpine mountains and valleys that's largely only accessible by vehicles with four-wheel drive and can take days to get in and out of. This place is popular for explorers, deer hunters, and hikers. I own a four-wheel drive truck, and this was the destination chosen to go camping for a few days with my girlfriend Jess. Some time away from the world beyond the reach of mobile phones. The four-wheel drive was loaded up, lists double-checked, vehicle maintenance done, fuel loaded onto the roof racks. The police station closest to our destination we notified of our trip. It's common for people to notify them as a safety measure, especially when not traveling in a convoy. Again, very remote area. And off we went. We were headed to a place called the Onondaga Valley, a remote valley deep in the high country, a huge amphitheater-type valley with alpine mountains rising high in every direction, and a river running along the valley floor. Towards the end of the first full day of driving, we made our way down the last track for the day, skirting the ridge and arriving at the valley floor just as the sun dipped below the mountains. We found a secluded spot to pitch our tent, nestled in amongst the eucalyptus trees by the riverbank. It was midweek and off-season, so we were the only ones in the valley that we knew of. After setting up camp and having a meal by the fire as the sun went down, we snuggled together in our sleeping bags, and in short order, we decided to hit the hay. At some point in the night, I woke up to a loud noise. I wasn't quite sure what I had heard, so from inside of our tent, I listened. Nothing. I must be going mad. But no sooner had I thought that, I heard another noise. It sounded like something falling off of our camp table and hitting the ground. I put it down to possums or wombats slinking about, common in the area and nothing to worry about. Man, we should have done a better job at packing up after dinner, I thought, and eventually fell back asleep. Sunrise came and we slowly woke up. Needing to pee, I opened the tent and jumped out. But as I was looking around, something came over me. A chill. The campsite wasn't the way we'd left it. Instead of seeing two chairs together by the fire where we were sitting, one of them was by the table, and on the table was a loaf of bread that I'd sworn I packed away the night before. I walked over to the table to inspect. A half-eaten piece of bread was sitting there, with very obvious chomp marks in it. I flung the tent open and asked Jess, "Were you up before me? Did you have some bread?" But she just shook her head no. Jess got up, and together we went through all of our stuff. Nothing was missing. As we went to check the truck, I noticed the footprints. There was a bunch of them around the front of the car where the hood was. Most of the camp was covered in grass. This happened to be one of the only few spots that was just dirt. Had someone tried to open it? Very distinct footprints. Not mine or Jess's. Perhaps they'd already been there? These camping spots are used intermittently, and obviously we weren't looking at the ground when we arrived the night before. I don't think either one of us wanted to actually admit what we were both thinking. That someone had been creeping about our campsite in the night, far from civilization. We discussed if a possum could have made the bite marks, argued about if one of us had left the bread out, and eventually discussed moving on and camping somewhere else. After much deliberation, we decided to stay. I had a rifle in the truck, which I guess gave me an overinflated sense of safety, which in hindsight was a pretty poor sense to have. As the day rolled on, the sun shining and with nothing eventful happening, I decided to walk across the valley floor, about 800 meters, to an old ruin of an isolated homestead built by settlers who ran cattle in the valley some 100 years ago. It happens to be steeped in mystery. There's an old unsolved multiple murder case from 1917 that always captivates people. I read the plaque, took some photos, and started wandering back towards camp. As I neared the halfway mark back to camp, I noticed Jess walking across the field towards me. Must have gotten bored, I thought. As she approached, it was clear that she was in a panic. Immediately, she began to tell me how she went down to the riverbank to wash the pots and pans, and as she looked up, she saw someone over on the other side of the river, watching her from deep in the bush. I had no reason whatsoever not to believe her. I asked what he looked like, and got told, an old man, 70s or thereabouts, scraggly looking, and in old tattered clothes. Apparently, the second she looked up, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the impenetrable bush. I couldn't quite comprehend it. How was anyone out here without a truck or a dirt bike? How would anyone get to that side of the bank without first crossing over from our side? There's days worth of damn near impossible to walk through bush on the other side, just to get to where my girlfriend saw him at. We decided to hop in the truck and drive along the length of the valley, checking out the dozen or so riverside camping spots as we went. I wanted to spot a camp, have my partner ID the guy, and make sure he wasn't creeping, with our theory being that he may have just been a hunter, off in the bush after a deer. After making our way up and down the valley and not seeing anything, we drove back to the camp at a loss, unable to explain anything. As the sun started to set, with both my girlfriend and I quite shaken, I grabbed the rifle and sat it next to us as we cooked dinner and chatted, having a few drinks to settle the nerves. Had we been spooked? Was it just that there's a lot of mystery surrounding the valley and the homestead murders? We talked a bit and settled into a good mood, warming in front of the fire. At some point, Jess needed to go to the restroom. I was asked to come with her to the spot behind a tree where we placed the portable toilet, no more than about 50 meters from camp. Considering everything that had gone on, it was a no-brainer. Jess did her business, and we turned around and came around the side of the tree. And that's when we saw him. Standing at our camp, about a meter from the rifle I had sitting against the table, was a man. Old? Check. Scraggly looking? Check. Tattered old clothes? Check. Jess squeezed my arm so hard, I thought it was going to come off. Everything about her body language screamed, "This is the same man." As we got closer, I could make out more odd things about him. He had part of a deer antler in his hand that looked like he'd been whittling away at it. And what looked like antler pieces carved to plug large holes in his ears, like stretchers, but made of bone. Same goes for the bone-looking buttons on his ratty old coat. He wore old leather shoes that looked as if they were homemade. "Good day, mate," he said. "Fuck me, mate. You gave us a fucking heart attack," I said, officially shitting bricks. "Where have you come from, my guy? Everything all right?" "Just over yonder. You lot aren't hunting around here, are you?" Looking directly at the rifle. "We might, yeah. Why?" There's no hunting around here. Not enough deer as it is." "Well, we hadn't decided on it. We're probably packing up anyway," I said as I edged my way towards that rifle. "I should put this away anyway. I didn't mean to spook you, mate," I said, looking for any excuse to get that rifle into my hands. "It's all good. Guns don't spook me," he said. I didn't imagine they would. I picked the rifle up by the barrel and held it like a walking stick in an attempt to be non-confrontational, breathing a sigh of relief once it was in my hand. "No offense, but you caught us by a bit of surprise. You gotta be the only one we've seen since we got here." "Yeah, I saw you come in last night." "I f***ing bet you did." "I've been coming up here for about 40 years now. Beautiful spot, isn't it? Takes a bit to get down into the valley, huh?" "Yeah, mate. Look, no offense, but we're gonna hit the sack soon. Do you need a lift back to your camp? No, all good. Just out for a wander before I tuck in for the night. Saw the fire and thought I'd say good day. Anyway, I'd better be on my way now. And with that, he turned and walked off, parallel to the river, into the dark. No torch. That was officially enough to spook us beyond any ability to calm down that night, and we decided to pack up in the dark and head out. Even if driving in the dark was a monumentally stupid idea in this part of the high country. We got into the truck and drove out. Taking us along the valley floor, we didn't see a single fire, camp, a vehicle, nothing. We just kept on driving. Halfway home, Jess, who was obviously bored from the drive, flipped on the camera that we had in our pack, the one that we had been taking nature photos and pictures of the homestead with. But there was no memory card in it. What the fuck? After getting home and telling a few people what had happened, a friend's dad, an avid bushman himself, was the one to officially freak us the hell out. "Oh, you met the Button Man." "The what now?" I said. "The Button Man. He's an old bushman who goes out into the high country for months at a time, hunts with a spear, appears out of nowhere, scares people, has buttons made out of bone. There's a heap of people who've gone missing up that way. The cops keep looking, but they can't find a single trace. Campers, hikers. One camp was found burnt to the ground, and a car left abandoned. They can't find any evidence at all." A quick Google confirmed it. The missing people, the Button Man, the lack of evidence. Police set out into the bush and found his camp. They spoke with him, but they have nothing else to go on. We were able to find an article that has some further info on the missing people and the mysterious Button Man himself. He's very real. Dozens have met him as he appears out of nowhere at their camp. But as for his connection to any of the missing people, well, only he knows that. We don't camp in that valley anymore. Hell, we don't camp that side of the high country anymore. Mainly because one meetup was enough. I can honestly say for both me and Jess, we'd rather not ever meet the Button Man ever again.